The primary kids have been very busy doing independent work and big projects. Here are some examples of some of the independent things they've done, like science riddles, code breakers pre-algebra, analogies, working on spatial reasoning puzzles, and working memory games. They've also been doing in the balance, which is another pre-algebraic math problem-solving activity. We do creativity exercises and critical thinking, like making Z-bits and doing waker-uppers. The students also finished up the fairy tale unit. They continued doing their menu board of activities, which you can see on the table there, and they also got in partners and teams to write stories. These stories had distinct beginnings, middles, and endings, and used the elements of the fairy tales. Mrs. Bennett sat down with each pair of students after she'd edited the stories herself and talked to them about what changes needed to happen and how they could improve their writing. She also talked about the strengths of their stories, from their voice to their grammar and punctuation, and their unique ideas, which they have a lot of. The students began integrating their stories with the technology they'd learned, learning more about coding by using the first coding book, and then applying it to making their own practice maps and programs to get them ready for the time when they actually make their stories into Sphero programs. Each of these maps were planned out ahead of time, and then they programmed the robot to follow the trail. Once they had that skill down, then they incorporated all their story elements into their Spheros. They made lists of props, and then of course they started to code it. Here are some of the props that the students made. They were so creative and cute. They had a lot of fun doing that, but they realized there was a lot of trial and error that had to be done in the engineering tasks of making the things and then having the Sphero to interact with them in the way that they wanted it to. Now it was time for the students to share their stories with their peers. They had a lot of fun listening to each other's stories, but they also learned a lot about dealing with frustrations and trials of trying to get things to work the right way, or if something worked well the first time, why it didn't the second time. We are glad the students have an opportunity to fail in a safe environment and to learn how failure feels, and also how good it feels to keep persevering.
Did you hear something? Yeah, we should check it out. Let's go. It's Baldy. We need a plan. But it's a giant magical tree frog. I am here to help you. I have advice. Outsmart him. And while you're at it, sick him. Well, that was crazy. Don't hurt my precious rubber duckies, they're my only friends.
Superstring Science is a hands-on science unit where each of the activities we did required the use of string. We started with a research blitz activity where the kids had to find all the facts they could about salt and sugar in a short period of time and then share it with each other without repeating information. We learned about molecules, crystals, and evaporation in our crystal unit, where kids made crystals using salt and sugar and then compared them. It took us a few weeks. In fact, we let it go over Christmas break until we got to see the results and the difference between the sugar and the salt. Each of the activities that we do, we would process and talk about the scientific principles behind them. In this activity, students had to try to pick up a piece of ice with a string. The only thing that they could alter was the type of material that they dropped on top of the string. And you can see we did have some success. Only salt melts the ice and refreezes around it because it lowers the melting point, which is why we use salt on the streets when it's icy. In our third activity, we worked with pendulums and recorded the different speeds that the pendulum swung based on the length of the string. We also figured out why a grandfather clock has the length of the pendulum that it does. A special congratulations to one of our students who did awesome in the United States chess competition, competing against kids much older than him. Here we are, the last day that we were all together before we split into the two smaller groups. It's been really successful, and we are looking forward to a lot of great things happening in Primary E.L. for the rest of the year.